Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. I welcome you very much to our 23rd webinar in this series. And we are celebrating with this webinar the International Biodiversity Day theme, which is we're part of the solution. And we're focusing today specifically on the solutions to global related challenges from cities. My name is Ingrid Kutsia. I'm the Director of Biodiversity, Nature and Health at Italy City's Biodiversity Centre, and I'm based here in Cape Town. I just want to, at this point, recognize all of our partners. You can see they're up there on the screen. And then specifically also to recognize the generous support of the EU Biodiversity Framework support for this particular webinar series. Just very quickly, as I said, this is the 23rd one in the series. We've got webinars up to the end of this year that have been scheduled. And just to, at this point, also say that all of our webinars, including today, these are recorded. And by registering and joining our webinar, we take it that you are happy and that you accept and agree to being a part of a recorded webinar. What happens is that we place these webinars on our YouTube website, and we also send out an email to all of the registered participants after the webinar, in which we give them the link to the YouTube channel, as well as copies of the presentations, and if there are any links to other websites or things that have been provided by the speakers, you will find that in that as well. And then just one or two other house rules, just to please ask everybody to make sure that their audio is off to avoid interference. And we also ask to keep the videos off to save bandwidth. And with this, I am going to then continue and just quickly run through the program. There will be a short update by myself on the roadmap to the Biodiversity COP. And then I'm going to introduce our speakers, and we have four cities or speakers that have joined us this afternoon. We have someone from Urbana. We're going to have a colleague that's going to talk about African cities. Then we go back to the States. We have San Antonio. And finally, we end off in Brazil with Belo Horizonte. And we hope that we will have some time at the end for questions and answers. If you do have any questions, I ask that you please put them in the chat. If it's directed at a specific speaker, please just also include who the speaker is that you're addressing it to. Then just very quickly, the roadmap to COP, we are fast approaching the end of this year. At the moment, we're in the process of the SAPSA, the technical, and the SBI, the implementation meetings. They're ongoing at the moment. We've got the IUCN Congress that is coming up in September, the open-ended working group, which will be in August this year. And then, of course, very important, the launch of the Ecosystem Restoration Decade, and COP then in October of this year. Just a few updates. The Edinburgh Declaration is still open for signature. We have around about 180 signatures. That's the link. Please, we encourage all cities and regions that are tuned in this afternoon or this morning to go and sign up and endorse the declaration. There was a very important event that was organized and led by Congope, which took place online in Ecuador towards the end of April. And that was really a very interesting and informative forum. And then just to say that the Secretariat of the CBD is organizing a workshop on the financial sector and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which will take place in June. More information on their website. And lastly, just to encourage everybody to also go and have a look at the CBD website. The Action Agenda for Nature and People has got its first issue up. There's a lovely newsletter, and there's a lot of information that's shared there as well. And then just lastly, the focus in this next couple of weeks, around 4 to 5 weeks, on the SAPSA, the subsidiary body on technical advice, and the implementation body. There's a range of meetings, plenary meetings and contact groups that are being held, number of different agenda items. I've mentioned them all there in the slide. It's too much detail to go into now, but some of the key topics are around resource mobilization, biodiversity and health, mechanisms for reporting, and then of course, very important, the mainstreaming of biodiversity, and specifically also a proposed decision text for engagement with local and subnational governments and a plan of action. That's item 11. Just to say that there will be no sort of adoption of policy statements at this meeting. That's all deferred to later physical meetings. And then finally, the point I want to make is that ICLEI, together with organizations such as Regions for Sustainable Development, the group of leading subnational governments towards the IT biodiversity targets, the Committee of Regions and the Advisory Committee on Subnational Governments are attending all of these plenary and contact sessions, and we will be making statements on some of the topics and the items I've listed there, and then we always share them on the Subnational Advocacy for Nature website, and you can find the link in the bottom there. And then with this, I would like to ask Scott and Jess and Julia and Joao to please put their videos on so that we can just quickly introduce all of our speakers this afternoon. We're going to start off with Scott Tess. He's the Sustainability and Resilience Officer from the city of Urbana, all the way in Illinois. And then a colleague of mine, Jess Kavanik. She's Senior Professional Officer for Climate Change and Urban Natural Assets, and she's based here in ICLEI, Africa. And she's going to talk about a number of cities in Africa. And then our next speaker will be Julia Murphy, and she's the Deputy Chief Sustainability Officer from the city of San Antonio and based in San Antonio. And finally, we have Joao Portela Sobral. And Joao, I hope I am pronouncing your name correctly. He's a forest engineer and a specialist on agroecology, and he's based in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. And welcome to all of our speakers. We really appreciate the time you take off for doing these webinars and preparing them. And we look forward to hearing about the solutions that you have come up with in your cities. You can all turn your videos off now, except for our first speaker, who's going to be Scott. And I'm going to hand over to Scott now. And you will share your screen, so I am going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you, Scott.
Good morning. Let me turn the screen sharing on. Okay, everybody see that?
Yep, thank you.
Well, it's morning for me, so good morning. It's really nice to be with you all and to share a little bit about what Urbana has been doing along the lines of nature and urban biodiversity. So the city of Urbana, trying to advance. Hold on one second.
Okay, there you are, you're back with us.
Doesn't want to advance to the next slide. Let me try one other thing. Okay, here we go.
There you go. Okay.
The city of Urbana has had a long-standing reputation in environmental sustainability. We were the first tree city designated community in the state of Illinois. We believe, we're not 100% certain, but we believe we were the first curbside recycling service in the state of Illinois. In 2003, a home in our community was the first passive house certified home in the United States. And we're actually host to the Passive House Institute headquarters for a number of years. I think they ended up moving on to Chicago. And we're also the first gold level certified bicycle friendly community in Illinois. And the University of Illinois, which is here in Urbana, is also a bicycle friendly campus. So long-standing environmental reputation. And we've also been doing a lot of nature and urban biodiversity type work for a number of years, but not really under that banner, not tied together in that way. And I want to share just a few of the things that we've been doing. So on the left, you can see a photo of our urban forest. The city, like most, manages all the trees between the curb and the sidewalk, the right-of-ways. We have 11,000 street trees that we manage and 4,000 vacant tree sites that we hope to plant in someday. And we manage those actually for diversity. We track our family, genus, and species of all of our street trees, and we're trying to push down the percentage that any particular family, genus, or species has among the total to maximize the diversity. In the middle, you can see a flyer for what's been, I think, 9 years running, a single day bulk compost bin and rain barrel sale. We do a competitive selection. You can see those prices are about half of retail. So we're cultivating gardening practices, water, stormwater capture and reuse, composting of landscape trimmings and food scrap at home. On the right, you see an image on the edge of our downtown. This is a new bioswale installation. So we're capturing stormwater, we're pushing it into, infiltrating into the ground rather than pushing it into gray infrastructure. And then thereby, we're also capturing that first flush of pollutants from the street. So particulates, oils, and et cetera. Here you see on the far left, that was a photo of our then newly minted greenway. There's a stream running through the city of Urbana called the Boneyard Creek, charming name. But this stream over the decades had been engineered with sheet piling and essentially turned into an open stormwater sewer going through town. What we've done here is remove the sheet piling, pull the banks back, naturalize it, and create this really nice poke space, this greenway. In the middle, you can see we, like many, are a member of the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. We're working to incorporate pollinator supportive and monarch supported plant species into our landscapes. We do use a lot of nativars, so horticultural varieties of native species. We do that because in Illinois, native species a lot of native species are 6-8 foot tall prairie plants. And if you put them next to a sidewalk or next to a street, they sort of flop over into the sidewalk and the street, and that's not workable. So a lot of times we'll use native cultivars of those natives so that they have shorter stature. On the right, you see a test strip in front of the Boneyard Creek. We were part of a one-day, this is a few years ago, a one-day citizen science atrazine sampling event. So there was communities all over the Midwest that got test strips, went out into the surface waters in their area and tested for atrazine. Atrazine is an agricultural chemical. On the far left here, this is our new monarch and pollinator garden at the Urbana City building. You can see some tall native prairie plants there. And also, I think I see in the front a cultivar of the native prairie blazing star. The native is tall and purple. This one is short and white. So I'm pretty sure that's not the native variety. In the middle, you see a flyer. We partnered with the Integrated Pest Management Institute on their program called Midwest Grows Green. That program is working to shift turf management, landscape management practices from synthetic chemicals, synthetic fertilizers and pesticides to a natural lawn care practice. The natural lawn care practice is mow high, core aerate, and top dress with natural compost. It's a really good fit for Urbana. One, because our community loves a little bit of a wild yard with native plants and less turf. But two, also because the city owns and operates a landscape recycling center where we take landscape trimmings and we compost it into a natural compost fertilizer product and sell that to the public. On the right, you see an image of a farm stand at one of our community gardens. This is a vacant lot that we allow a community group to use for $1 a year. We just expanded this program into another vacant lot. It's a lot that we own. We want to hold long-term because we're actually going to expand that greenway, but we don't have use for it for the next few years. So we're leasing it to a community garden operator to grow more food. On the bottom, you see a logo from the Urbana Free Library. That's our public library. About 1.5 years ago, they created a seed lending library. So now in the fall, if folks have extra seed packets or they collect some seed from their garden, they can donate that to the seed lending library. Then somebody else comes in the spring and gets some seed to plant either for landscaping or for vegetables in their own garden. So we've been doing all these different nature and urban biodiversity programming, but not really under that title. Cities with Nature came along, and it was a perfect opportunity to sort of tie all this together and also further and advance this type of work. And so we started going through the pathway and having conversations internally with the city about what we want to do along these lines. And about that time, the University of Illinois was updating their climate action plan. They wanted to create a new chapter, a new section called resilience, but they wanted campus and community resilience, not just ending the fence line at the campus boundaries. So they invited the city to participate. And one of the things we brought into this process was this notion of nature and urban biodiversity. And we've now got the campus committed to funding and staffing a regional biodiversity plan. So instead of just Urbana on our side of town focusing on this, we're now expanding that impact to the entire metro region. One of our current projects along these lines is with our urban forest. The Lumpkin Family Foundation has funded a study for us looking at our vacant tree site distribution along the lines of race and income, so with census data, with the intention of evaluating whether there's any correlations between planted trees, vacant trees, and race and income, and ameliorating that problem if we find such a problem. And what we're working on for the future is to just advance this work, tie it together into a more concerted nature and urban biodiversity program. And with that, I'll take any questions or we'll go to the next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you've kept well within your time, Scott. Some really interesting things. I love the idea of a tree library, and it's just, that's such a novel one. That's a great one. Scott, if you can just stop sharing the screen, I will then ask our next speaker, Jessica Kavanek. And then Jess, you can start sharing your screen. Thank you so much. Jess, over to you.
Thanks, Ingrid. So thanks so much for inviting us to be part of this webinar. In particular, I'm going to start talking about the UNA program. So what is the UNA program? It stands for the Urban Natural Assets for Africa. It's quite a complex program, but simply put, it's really about integrating nature considerations and particularly nature-based solutions into land use and decision-making in sub-Saharan African cities, with the idea of building increased resilience. We're not just talking climate resilience, we're also talking resilience of social systems, resilience of planning systems, resilience of governance systems. And that's why I said it is quite complex to explain. But you'll see on the right of the screen is all the various cities that we've been implementing this program in. There are 8 cities over 6 countries. And the program has been running for 8 years now. So as I say, it's got a lot of information underneath it, a lot of cities, and it's got quite detailed objectives. So I was a bit worried of how to kind of present all the different solutions and all the different work we've been doing in these cities in just 10 minutes. But what we have been doing is the phase of UNA is starting to come to an end as we embark on the 3rd phase of the program. And we've been kind of categorizing all of our different actions and solutions into what we've called impact pathways. So I thought this would be a very good way of trying to explain the work and the various solutions that we've been doing in these cities by taking you through each impact pathway and then bringing it down to a localized level to show you what we were doing in each city. So the first pathway of where we've seen that we've made quite a bit of change is in the space of policy reform. So we've been working with all those cities over the years to really try and address gaps in urban policies and urban plans. So if I localize that, one of our first cities that we've been working in is Dar es Salaam. And we've been doing a huge amount of work in trying to get nature considerations into planning guidelines. So the city, the capital city of well, not the capital anymore, but one of the primary growth cities in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, was using their planning guidelines dated in 2007. So you can imagine it was very outdated in terms of the reality of what was happening on the ground. So the opportunity came to support the city with updating these guidelines at a national level. And this was one way where climate and nature was put at the forefront of addressing some of the real challenges that city was facing. Another kind of activity we did was in Addis Ababa. So the city council came to us and said, we're really struggling with trying to access finance for nature-based solution projects. And so we spent quite a bit of time supporting their public-private procurement policies and seeing how these could be reshaped to really integrate nature fully into these, and drafted recommendation reports and guidelines to support this. The second impact pathway is under practice reform. So really trying to make practice-based change in the cities. And we did this by providing cities with tools and resources that would be able to help them make more informed decisions around nature and nature considerations, but also be able to integrate or mainstream those considerations into planning. I must just say those tools and resources have been fully co-produced with the city. So it wasn't us coming in and developing resources that would just be sitting on a shelf. They really were needs-based and also linked with the current context in that city. So again, to localize this, how did this look? Well, in Lilongwe, the capital of Malawi, this looked like prioritization maps. So we spent a huge amount of time working with your finance officers, decision makers, politicians, environmentalists, planners, communication officers, to really come up with their priority, where they think their natural assets are absolutely critical for their city. And if they lost them, it would cause and undermine the resilience of the city as a whole. And this information was pulled together into prioritization maps, which now are used as a decision-making tool by the City Council and have almost unlocked an array of other recommendation documents and decision-making support tools that have informed practice and how nature is really protected at a localized level. In Nacala, the capital of, or one of the primary cities in Mozambique, a coastal natural asset management plan was co-produced, which really provided the groundwork of how, an action-orientated groundwork of how coastal natural assets could be protected in that coastal zone, not only from a perspective of bringing nature back to the city, but also how the coastal natural assets could be used for livelihoods and generating livelihoods in a sustainable manner, because there's such a high reliance on livelihoods at the city level. The third kind of area of change is what we've called mainstreaming in practice. So what this UNO program has learned over its 8 years is that it's not enough to just provide information to local governments or cities and then expect this information to be mainstreamed or taken up or integrated. What really needs to happen is that information needs to be produced together, because that's how new entry points for mainstreaming and integration are embedded in decision-making. And so as a result, we've run over 85 co-production, learning, and knowledge generation engagements, which really sees an array of different disciplines, different stakeholders, different levels of government come together and really produce knowledge together. And as we say, to generate more entry points. So not only information, but also how that information can then be taken forward. And we've really seen the power of these spaces and these coming together spaces. An example in cities at a local level is these UNO maps, this prioritization maps that I spoke about in Lilongwe. We saw an environmentalist and a planner come together to design these maps. And in the first workshop, the planner said to us, why are the environmentalists in the room? They just provide information. They don't need to be part of designing maps on how the city is planned for future. They just need to provide the information. And we worked with them for 3 years to design these maps. And by the end, we had a new intern, a new young planner join the team. And he asked the exact same question. And the head of the planning department answered him of why the environmentalists need to be in the room when planning cities more effectively, more brilliantly, and strategically than any other technical officer from the environment could have, purely because he had been through that process and he had seen the value of co-creating these kind of resources together. The same thing had happened in Uganda, where the disaster risk reduction strategies were co-produced, and how those unlocked so many other ways that nature could have been mainstreamed because everybody came together. The fourth impact pathway, or fourth area of change, is capacity building. So we built the capacity of over 2,000 African stakeholders, but probably the one that we're most proud of is in the two Mozambique cities, Nacala and Kilimani, where a need came at us of how to access finance for nature-based solutions work. And we embarked on a 3-year process with these cities to develop concept notes around pilot ideas or demonstration projects, and then took one of those concept notes to pre-feasibility to try and unlock funding for nature-based solutions work. And the entire process was followed through capacity building, so that those city officials now have the resources and also the skills, the technical skills, to develop other concept notes and other pre-feasibility studies, and really can talk the finance language, so that it's not just bound in a grant-funded project, but they really can advocate for more nature-based resources and finance-related work in those cities. The fifth change area is localizing international agendas. So we have the Sendai framework, we have the Paris agreements, we have the New Deal for biodiversity, but how do you actually help cities understand those frameworks, understand what's required and the reporting, but also to then localize that and put on the ground implementation that actually achieves meeting those targets. So we spent quite a bit of time, and we have 4 cities that really led that work. Nacala developed an urban park, which aligned with the biodiversity frameworks, as well as the climate change frameworks. Lilongwe, we had a river restoration project, which really aligned with, which brought soil composting and greening. And this aligned strongly with a huge amount of SDGs and reaching those SDG targets, as well as the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. Addis Ababa is proud to have implemented an ecological corridor through the very heart of their city. And then Entebbe was a very interesting on-the-ground pilot, acknowledging that their wetlands are encroached by huge urbanization rates. And the national government decided to test a pilot of using native vegetation as a social ecological buffer zone. So planting thick vegetation around wetlands as a means to try and stop encroachment onto wetlands, but also bring back ecotourism into the city. Our 6th pathway is about innovation and experimentation. So really, we acknowledge this high urbanization rate, the high land use change in Africa, and how do we develop African approaches to deal with urbanization that brings nature back and also protects these native pockets of biodiversity in the city. So we developed and capacity built our African decisions on alternative approaches to planning. And we've even recently developed an online course to take various target audiences, primarily city officials, through these alternative approaches. And it's a very, very exciting course that is really interactive, dialogic, and engaging. In Kisumu in particular, they were the champions of one of the approaches called urban tinkering, which is tinkering with your natural environment, with your built environment, and bringing nature back into that built environment. We also supported cities with alternative approaches to community engagement. So acknowledging that civic participation in decision-making is absolutely critical, particularly in Africa, due to that high reliance on natural assets for their livelihoods. And so we work with our cities to do that. And then the 7th one is about resilience. So we're very, very key at always ensuring that power dynamics and gender in our project design was always taken into account. So we developed games that really kind of brought the team together. In Addis Ababa, we actually had the tool Minecraft, which is a computer game and we used the computer game to design a public open space. And then in the long way, we prioritize composting and generation of women's livelihoods. And finally, we tried to work as much with urban informality as possible. So that links with alternative approaches that I spoke about, but in particular, supporting the mind shift that these areas are unplanned and therefore not mandated by the city officials to deal with to unserviced. And nature-based solutions is a key way to service those. And then we did that through walking workshops. And we also worked at these informal markets and chose informality as sites for restoration. So those are all of our impact pathways that can be found at this link. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's just struck me, you know, the power of planning and co-design or co-production and how much one can achieve with very little resources but just by working together and looking at it from the planning and decision-making perspective. Julia, I'm going to hand over to you. I think you're our next speaker. And if you would just turn your video on. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. And I'm Julia Murphy. I'm the Deputy Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of San Antonio, Texas, in the US. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about our tri-national support for biodiversity and access to nature through a new initiative that we are undertaking right now. So next slide, please. So in late 2019, the City of San Antonio passed its first climate action and adaptation plan. And then we immediately went into the unprecedented year of 2020. So our implementation plans for acting on climate were altered, I'll say, and maybe paused a bit. But we still found a couple of pathways forward to keep working on the things that are important to us, and especially on nature-based solutions. So later that year, we were selected to be one of the pioneer cities of ICLEI's Cities with Nature platform. And that provided us a great way to start bringing attention to that area of our climate action plan that may not have been at the top of the list of priorities. So our mayor is a huge champion of the initiative. And I just want to read a quote of his because I think it forms a great framework for what we're talking about today. And he said that we know that caring for nature is essential to sustainable future. Naturally, we celebrate this initiative and look forward to working together as stewards of our planet. So, like the mayor said, in San Antonio, it's recognized that conservation is key to community resilience and natural resource regeneration, specifically the air, water, soil, and native plants and animals on which we all depend and that are essential for our quality of life. Next slide, please. So later in the fall of 2020, San Antonio invited sister cities in Guadalajara, Mexico, and Montreal, Canada, to participate in Biodiversity Without Borders. We formed a two-part panel discussion and called it a natural pathway for cooperation. So our mayor was joined by the Canadian Consul General, Dr. Rachel McCormick, and Mexican Consul General, Dr. Ruben Minuti. And they kicked off a two-part program that focused on the importance of collaborating on environmental issues across borders. After the announcement of the establishment of a new North American Friendship Garden to be located in San Antonio, Texas, city staffers then from the three cities discussed the importance of local policies to support biodiversity and access to nature. And the program was enriched further by the San Antonio River Authority, the San Antonio River Foundation, the National Wildlife Federation, and ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. So I'll be telling you a little bit more about this project in the ensuing slides. Next slide, please. But first, I'd like to highlight a few projects in our North American partner cities that enhance mutual goals and that highlight the work that they're doing. So I don't mean to be their representative because they are actually boots on the ground doing the work, but there are some fabulous programs, you know, in our neighboring countries that I was really happy to learn about, and it just provides a platform of hope. So in Guadalajara, just to mention a couple of things, they are a tree city of the world, or a ciudad arbol, and they have established the Ciento Parques, or 100 parks. They're Conectando con Alas, or Connecting with Wings public policy, is forming a network of pollinator gardens across the city, which not only support native species through habitat restoration, but also is beautifying the community. Next slide, please. In Montreal, it's the home to Insectarium, considered North America's leading museum devoted to insects. The museum's mission is to celebrate the fascinating and often misunderstood world of insects from all over the world. And community-based programs there include Mission Monarch, a citizen science program documenting the monarch's reproductive success across Canada. And they also host Monarch Fiesta. It's an annual family fiesta put on by the Insectarium. And they do My Space for Life Garden, an initiative that invites Quebec's residents and organizations to manage gardens that offer diverse landscapes in order to foster biodiversity in urban environments. Next slide, please. And so back in my hometown of San Antonio, we are fortunate to have a legacy of conservation initiatives. And all of these initiatives are supported by the local government. And I think that's kind of the message that I want to convey in my presentation today, that it takes partners from both the public and private sectors to really impact and support these initiatives. It's just a few of the things that we have going on in San Antonio, Texas. We have the Alamo Area Monarch Collaborative. We have an annual Monarch and Pollinator Festival. We are very close to the Bracken Cave Bat Preserve, which is one of the largest concentrations of mammals in the world. They come every year back and forth from Mexico to San Antonio and live in a cave that's very close to the downtown core. We also have improved our San Antonio River. We have an extensive greenway trail system. We are home to Mitchell Lake Audubon Center. And we also have the San Antonio Missions National Historical Park, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the first and only one in Texas. Most recently, we built the Phil Hardberger Park Land Bridge, which consists of connects two sides of an urban park over a busy highway, and is the largest wildlife crossing constructed to date in the United States. Next slide, please. So here's a picture of it on the left. You can see the land bridge while it was under construction. It is now completed and has been revegetated and is open for the public to use. And they've actually put some wildlife cameras up and are starting to see that the wildlife are actually utilizing this corridor over the busy highway. So we're really happy about that. But moreover, these projects demonstrate that San Antonio values investing in nature-based solutions. And just a few factoids, the 150-foot wide land bridge was $23 million, also features an elevated skywalk and rainwater catchment and artistic bird blinds. So it's a very beautiful place to visit. And then on the right-hand side, you can see just an image of the San Antonio River and the connections that it has made throughout our community. It connects 11 parks with 4 paddling trails and is accessible from the urban core. Next slide, please. So soon, very soon, this month actually, we'll be adding to this list of projects the North American Friendship Garden. And it's why is it North American? Because as you can see from this map on the left, the Central Flyway stretches over 5,000 miles through 3 countries. And the Central Flyway is used by hundreds of birds, butterflies, and other migratory species a couple of times annually at least. And you can see in the map, Texas sits right in the middle of it. Next slide, please. So as I said, it's going to be unveiled in just a couple of weeks, and it will commemorate International Day for Biological Diversity. And here's another quote that I'd like to read, this one from Consul General of Mexico, Dr. Reba Minuti, who said, "The North American Friendship Garden reflects the longstanding, healthy, and productive relationship between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Our government is very pleased to celebrate our trilateral ties with this garden, a true symbol of friendship, solidarity, and cooperation between our countries." And with that, I would like to thank you for allowing me to present today. We're very excited about this project, and especially about creating the stronger ties between our three governments, all working towards the common goal of nature-based solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I think it's such a beautiful one. I mean, a clearer message of solidarity and using nature. And I love that, biodiversity without boundaries. It's a really lovely one. Thanks again. We've come last but not least to our last speaker, João Portello, and I want to ask him to share his screen. Right, thank you. Let's hear what Brazil has to offer. Thanks, João. All to you.
Okay, here we go. So thank you everybody for this opportunity. Now we'll present our experience of Belo Horizonte metropolitan area on this Interact Bio project. We are working on this from 2018. So we took great time, like discussing and rediscussing again and deciding different afterwards. So I will try to give you an overview and also share the process and then some results we are focused on. So I am here representative of this Belo Horizonte metropolitan area focal group. By the way, I'm not in the local government anymore, but I took part in the whole project, so I'll share with you. Let's see. So here a little bit about Belo Horizonte metropolitan area. Here is the state of Minas Gerais in red in Brazil. And then in yellow, the inside Minas Gerais state, the metropolitan area of Belo Horizonte. And we, after a whole analysis in the region, we stayed for the beginning in two cities with the clay focus, or the first focus, we would say. Belo Horizonte and Contagem, which are neighbors municipality or cities. Okay, two of the main cities in the metropolitan area. So some points, some considerations about master planning in Belo Horizonte and also in Contagem. In Belo Horizonte, we started building up our master plan in 2011, and we finished, and like it was approved as a law in 2019. So this is kind of a zoning. It generates a zoning, a mosaic of different zoning areas in the cities where it's allowed or forbidden something, and also connected to environmental promotion, special areas for protection, and stuff like that. It's the master plan for the city, the whole city. And also Contagem has just this year finishing and starting running its also master plan. So our idea, our project also is connected to this context, and we used lots of this information that have been generating for years to do our analysis in the project and proposing the points, the focus, the actions. So, of course, talking about the SDG, and especially talking about sustainable and resilient city, what it would really be. And here in Brazil, we did, I think we did a discussion a little bit different than the cases we had from the colleagues before, because we included a very strong focus and a very strong point on considering how the social inequalities, but also how the social potentialities could be used for promoting sustainable and resilient city. To go in one point, one main point I will also present for you is agroecology. How agroecology, how urban agriculture based on agroecology principles could lead us strongly to a more sustainable and resilient cities. Also, how can we face this economical recovery and in this a very bad pandemic and coming up the post-pandemic context. I know you all know that Brazil, we have a really hard context about pandemic. So how to improve biodiversity and ecosystem services in Belo Horizonte's metropolitan areas, considering nature-based solutions and the SDG approach. And then agroecology for us is one main point, and I will in this last part of the presentation talk about it a little bit with you. So we consider two, this is the metropolitan region. We consider two focus area inside, mountain range corridor, which is this one, and the Boto Valley corridor. Another is this other little yellow one over here. Okay, this is the map we generate with eClay throughout the interactive bio process. So this is the two areas, the mountain mosaic. These colored points are different kinds of parks, farms, mining, and different categories of soil use. And also here we have some color points, which is this different mosaic of kind of main and big areas of different kinds of soil use, okay, land use, sorry. So we took this in consideration, and then we choose some points. How will we work with iClay and interactive bio in Belo Horizonte? And then we go to field. We went to field to see how it was, problems we had, conservation's potential we had, and we did after this a matrix for choosing priority areas. It was a very rich process, okay, and we did a rank, and then after it's important to consider we had in Belo Horizonte metropolitan area this process with interactive bio. It was very rich, talking about the many kinds of organizations we could put together to discuss. And as this first round or this first process, we had a consensus that we should focus on agroecology as a main theme, agroforestry as a subtheme in agroecology, urban agroforestry, and link it to urban agriculture. And then as a pathway for sustainable, creative, smart cities. Okay, and also considering the mosaic of conservation and family farmers area connected, conservation, agroecology, and agroforestry, and urban agriculture, together to conservation's unities promoting conservation and nature protection and promotion. So after that, we had some institutional reorientation, and we had to rediscuss and re-agree, and then we have our final suggestion, our final project goals. So it comes to rain gardens as a important tool to make water get inside the soil, no? Okay, to infiltrate. I don't know if this exists in English, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. Like the water get inside the land, inside the soil, and not flows out. So we will do 2 areas, 2 reference unities in parks and in a square with these 2, one in Belo Horizonte and the other one in Contagem with rain gardens, different kinds to serve, to be references. And we will do some agroforestry also in a project together to University, Minas Gerais University. We did a cooperation, and we do some urban agroforestry in a neighborhood. Okay, this is the last one, in the connection between Belo Horizonte and Contagem. So this is our project now, like the last solution we got together. So rain gardens and agroforestry, urban agroforestry in conjunto com Fisco. So thank you, everyone. I'm here for questions and to keep on talking with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, João. Wow, that's been a series of really amazing presentations. I've learned a lot, very inspiring. And the one thing that struck me, it's so great to see how the cities, and we've really moved from Brazil, from North America to Africa, and in different parts of Africa, you know, how there may be similar challenges or issues, but how the solutions that are come up with are very, very different. And I think the other things that struck me is that many of these solutions are really very innovative and very sort of positive and constructive solutions, and they really, you know, make me feel hopeful again, and to see this incredible stuff. I mean, it's just such lovely examples out there. So what I'm wondering is, we don't have any question. I see there is a comment, maybe from someone. Let's just see. Yes, there is one question. How can we best make the political and economic case for continuing and expanding the nature or biodiversity programs of cities, given the intense pressures of the COVID pandemic? And yeah, just a comment that there's been so much great work done by all the speakers. And maybe just in the few minutes that we've got left, Scott, do you want to respond to this, or who would like to respond first?
Yeah, that's a real challenge. I think the way to connect this with folks so that it's a priority is to tie it in with health. And there's a lot of tie-ins with health, with urban biodiversity. So, you know, access to nature improves psychological health, even if it's just a little bit of green out of a window, time physically spent in nature, and it doesn't have to be a big forest, but can be a small neighborhood park, improves human health. Better air quality through more nature and urban biodiversity improves health. I think those things really connect with folks.
Thanks. And maybe Julia, if you would like to just briefly respond. I see there is a question also for Zhao, actually from Jess, and I know why she's asked that question, but before we go to Zhao, let's quickly hear from Julia.
I would just echo what Scott says. And, you know, our connection is to link back. We're trying to advance a climate action agenda. And so linking it back to health, to people's personal pocketbooks and quality of life has been the best path forward for us to showcase why it's important for us to protect our natural resources for all of those reasons.
Okay, great. And then Zhao, we have a question about, you mentioned the fact that you're working across many scales, community to local, local to national, etc. And that, you know, it's a multi-country project. And the question is, can you reflect on the challenges and opportunities linked to all these scales? I know that we in Africa have had similar issues. So if you could please say something about that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would just a small consideration on the first question about political and economic strategies or way of working on. I would just to emphasize again how agroecology and urban agriculture could be one of the directions for responding this. Because at least here in Brazil, we get back in the hunger map again. So if we could connect growing food or promoting food security on one hand, and together in the other hand, promoting nature-based solution and promoting biodiversity, I think it is a good point to work on as one of the good strategies. So talking about the Jazz question, I would say, first of all, we need to hear, sorry, the local people, like from the local context, people that are in the ground, because usually sometimes we come with a development project built up in the office, and then you come with a very beautiful idea, and then when we arrive in the reality, there's many things that we didn't consider before. And I know everybody knows exactly what I mean. So, Jess, I would say, I would consider a good way to connect local scale to regional scale and worldwide scale would be, first of all, yes, we can think worldwidely, but I would start talking and listening, really listening, local scale, people that are over there in the local scale, and then from the ground, from the bottom to the top, start building up the strategy. So, and a very important focus point on how could we share, really share initiatives, ideas, good points, because some of us already have a very strong background as how could be a good way for sustainable development. But are we disposed to change our mind, to consider in a different point of a way of view? So I think it's something about hearing the ground and building up from the ground to the up, and sharing a lot, networking a lot. I don't know if I your point, but I would consider this.
Thank you so much, Zhao. And in a sense, it's a whole discussion that we can have just on that topic. We've unfortunately come to the end, but I want to just keep everybody for 1 or 2 more minutes, because there's another question to Jess. And basically, Jess, I think the issue is within the context of informality, how does something like urban tinkering, which you just very briefly referred to, how could that help protect and revitalize urban natural assets and also improve the people's quality of life?
Ingrid, Yeah, I think I mentioned in the presentation how rapidly spread urbanization is in Africa, and we all see the facts on paper: 700% growth by 2050. But what the reality of that actually is that large portions of cities are informal, and unfortunately, because they don't fit into the mandate of service delivery by city officials, because they're not meant to be there, they're unplanned, they're often left without services. And so what we've been doing is we've been trying to come into these areas, as I said, change mindsets, that they're not unplanned, they're unserviced, and how can nature-based solutions be that answer? So very much what Jao also spoke about, the kind of retention ponds and the bioswales and all those community gardens, bringing that in, but really trying to say, cities developed around nature, they developed around rivers, they developed around forests because of those services that they provided. So how do we bring back those services back into the small pockets of a city, and almost formalize those areas through that? And yeah, so that's what I meant by urban tinkering. And just a quick comment on that: often these big scale greening infrastructure projects are complex because they require a lot of budget, they require a lot of time. The local ownership, community engagement is quite a challenging thing. And then you have maintenance, you have to maintain them. So urban tinkering has unlocked this kind of tension area in decision makers, that you can do things on a much smaller scale, but have a much larger impact because it feeds into a much broader ecological plan, which is often like really, really exciting to see, and work actually gets done.
Thank you so much. And with that, unfortunately, we have to cut it off here. We've run out of time, but I just want to say to all of our speakers, we really value and appreciate the effort and the time you've put in being with us today, and also to all the participants for joining us. I just remind everybody again that we will send out an email with the link to the YouTube recording, as well as the presentations and any links that there have been. And to say that certainly the examples that we've had today, as I said earlier, it does give me hope that the solutions that we're coming up with cities will definitely help us come to a situation where we can build back better, and nature is the foundation, and we will live in harmony with nature going forward. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day or your evening.